Hi, this is part 3 of Venus Retrograde. But first, I made a mistake in my part 2 of the same series where I mentioned that Marilyn Monroe was born in 1928. She was not born in 1928. She was born in 1926 on June 1st. So, and because of that, Judy has me now carry cue cards so that I don't forget and so I can read in front of me. And I'm like, really? So, sorry, I gotta now carry cue cards. That way I don't forget and lose myself track, okay? Because I'm not good at reading from the monitor. So they're gonna want me to do like, cue cards like in talk shows. So, oh my God. Okay. So, let me go back to the 7th house. Venus in Aries, where she's retrograde now, in the 7th house, which is the house of marriage, which is the house that belongs to Libra. So Venus is at home in the 7th house. But with her being retrograde in the 7th house, it can cause problems in business because the 7th house is the house of partnership. So if Venus is retrograde and you have a partner or you are in partnership, things can go wrong where someone might be missing money and one might blame the other, or maybe one might not be as good of an accountant as the other one is. In any event, there may be some problems with the accounting practices of a joint venture if you are that kind of person that's involved in a business venture with somebody else. If not, then you have to concern yourself with personal relationships, the interpersonal relationships, because when Venus is retrograde, you run the risk of, God forbid, having a real major ugly fight in which you can break up. When Venus goes retrograde, we have lots of breakups. Oh yeah. This is the time where I get most of my clientele. Is when Venus goes retrograde, when Mercury goes retrograde, which is something that we're going to talk about in the next series, because that retrogradation is approaching us soon. On the 28th, Mercury goes retrograde, but you usually feel it a week or so beforehand, especially if you are a Virgo or if you are a Gemini, or if you have Virgo or Gemini on the ascendant, or Mercury on the ascendant, or on the midheaven, or in strong angles to other planets in the horoscope, then you are also going to feel the retrograde as it approaches. Okay? But now we're talking about Venus, and Venus is retrograde. That also affects Taurus. And when Venus, if we're just going to take a pause for a moment, and from the houses, and let me explain a little bit about how Venus retrograde, although in Aries, it will still affect Taurians and Libras alike, because that's the natural ruler of Taurus and Venus. It doesn't happen to be in Taurus right now or in Libra right now. It happens to be in Aries. But it's still opposite of Libra, so it's going to affect more Librans than it will be Taurians. But nonetheless, Taurians are not going to be unscathed. And because Taurus rules money and personal liberty and values, these are the areas that are going to come into high focus with Venus retrograde for the next couple of months. So stay alert, stay on the look, watch the pocketbook. Venus and and Libra and Taurus alike, they like to spend money, not on other people. Self-indulge, which is a Taurian trait. All that stuff has to be put on the back burner, and really think rationally, because when Mercury goes retrograde, and that's going to be on another talk, another topic, we'll go more deeper into how it will affect Virgos and Geminis particularly. Right now with Jupiter retrograde, since it has been, again, since January 9th, that was the other mistake that I made, is that You know, I knew it was January, early January, you know. I knew it was the 9th. Sometimes I forget, you know. So, I'm not getting any younger. So, you know, Judy, thanks. I don't know what I'd do without her, but yeah, the Jupiter went retrograde on the 9th, not on the 5th. And of course, Marilyn Monroe was born on the 26th, not the 28th, like I had said in the other entry. So, I apologize about that. And I think I will be using the cue cards. With Venus in Aries retrograde in the 8th house, we have issues of power and struggle. Now, the 8th house is the house of Scorpio. So when Venus is retrograde in the 8th house in Aries, in the house of Scorpio, there might be problems with money. The money might not be flowing in, or people may owe you money and they might not be able to pay you. Or something that you thought was going to pay off big dividends suddenly falls to the wayside. Or you could be the victim of identity theft. You know, all that kind of stuff can happen with Venus in the 8th house, which is the house of Scorpio, which is the house of resources. Usually other people's resources. So be on the lookout, you know. And also, you might have to go through a change. Are you doing things that are not working for you when it comes to making money? Do you have to reinvent yourself, reinvent the wheel, or go at it at a different way? These are the questions that you have to ask yourself when Venus is retrograde in the 8th house of Scorpio. Because, you know, Scorpio, then there's death, and then there's sex. The sex, again, might go on the down, it might take a dive. You know, because again, Scorpio is a sex sign. Venus rules sexuality and lovemaking as well. So to have a retrograde in the 8th house of Scorpio means that the sex activity might cease temporarily or altogether. You know, it might be the beginning of things going wrong. Okay, there may need to be more communication than actual physicality of sex. You know, because with Venus, which rules Libra, there's an aspect of interpersonal communicating and relating outside of the realm of sex. And that doesn't necessarily go well with Scorpio energy. So that's something that might come up in the 4. So be on the lookout for that. Also, going to the 9th house. The 9th house deals with higher beliefs. It's Sagittarius. Now, Jupiter is retrograde. So it's affecting that house as well. So to have Venus in the 9th house, which is also retrograde, is like having 2 retrogrades in the same house. So that house is going to be very heavily affected if you have Aries in the 9th house, you know, where Venus is retrograde. So does your your overarching of life, is it still stand? In the sense that the goals that you created, are they still the same goals, or do they need a revamping? Because with Venus retrograde in the 9th house, the goals that you set out for yourself might need a revamping, might need to be reevaluated, where you can maybe add more room to make changes so that you can strategize and move on to the next level. Okay, so the retrogrades, they're not as bad as people would like to make them out to be. If anything, they can be very inconvenient at best. But I think when the planets go retrograde, it's like the gods are doing us a big favor. They're giving us time to correct things, and that's not a bad thing. Okay, with Venus in the 10th house, public standing, fame, reputation, all these things come to the fore. How do you define yourself and your success? Is your reputation and platform in need of revamp? That might happen too. Remember, this is a Capricorn house, and that's the devil. So things are not going to come easy or smoothly in this house. So do you have to reinvent the wheel? Do you have to look at yourself honestly and then make the proper assessments? Because Venus rules inner values. So if there's anything going on that's wrong, it's not going to be somebody else to blame. It really has to be you. You really have to look at you, because these are your own personal values and pathos. And if they need to be revamped and changed, you need to reach a level of decision making to do that. And the retrograde might award you that opportunity to do that. Okay. The 11th house, this is the Aquarian house, where you have dreams and networks, Are your friendships authentic? No? Or are they a means to an end? See, with Venus retrograde, it's almost like Venus squaring Uranus. You might not be a good friend. You might think you're a good friend, but you're actually a user. Are you that type of person? Do you take your friends for granted? These are the things that you have to ask yourself with Venus retrograde in the 11th house of Aquarius, which deals with friendships and friends. Again, it has to be, of course, in Aries, but it's an Aquarius house. And then the last house, which is the most mysterious of all, and is where Pisces and Venus is exalted. It's in Pisces, the 12th house. There are hidden traumas here. Do you know what they are? They might resurface without you knowing. Do you know how to handle it? Will you be able to identify what's causing the problem? These are the things that you have to evaluate and be very careful. You might have dreams of past life, or you might have a romantic love affair. Or if you're married, you might cheat on your spouse. Because, the 12th house is the house of clandestine affairs. So to have Venus here can mean that you're doing some things on the down low. Okay? And that concludes the Venus retrograde. We went past 40 seconds. Judy, I did good. I just 40 seconds. Okay. Thank you. Boom.